Hello everybody, and welcome back to another heaping serving of the horrors of war and the finale of our trilogy in Allied Assault, the PC Medal of Honor that hooked enough multiplayer LAN partiers back in the day to have EA develop a war chest for it. Does everybody call their expansion collector's editions war chests, or was that just a Warcraft thing? Well, it doesn't matter. What matters is that the original was a boilerplate World War II Europe game with everything you expected, and Breakthrough was pretty much more of the same, except in different locales, more interesting shootouts. The engine was cleaned up a bit, and it was as long as the base game. Wow! And that brings us to the end of the train in Spearhead, and I'm kinda excited for it. You know, since this was back in the day when EA actually gave a shit about developing video games and selling them for real-world money. The game begins in, oh boy, it looks like it starts in D-Day. Well, this expansion certainly isn't mincing words, and likely so considering how the intro started. At this point, I really shouldn't be surprised that it is a stock footage cutscene, but what did strike me was that the narration was actually kinda exciting, telling us what the mission of our team was and what role we would be playing throughout the game in this fictitious part of the real war.
The whole world knows we're coming. Under the command of General Eisenhower, Allied forces are about to launch the biggest offensive in the history of modern warfare. Its code name, Operation Overlord.
Obviously, it being D-Day means that Spearhead begins pretty late into the war, and after the inspirational tale of our smashing into the German lines, you realize that this is going to be a game about the player decisively tearing apart the last Axis defenses and destroying the entire Reich over the campaign trail. A legendary and difficult path to walk. Hell, this continues into the opening few minutes of the game as well, as you start off not on a boat as you would expect, but in a plane, going in as part of the paratrooper squads that supported the Atlantic Wall Assault, and believe it or not, Spearhead does begin introducing some storytelling efforts in its franchise. Unfortunately, it's the weakest version, almost exclusively being conversations being barked at you by your comrades or COs, telling you what to do or being slightly apprehensive or aggressive toward the campaign in general, which isn't surprising. 1945 in the middle of Belgium wasn't exactly the chipper high-spirit place you would expect it to be. It's not true characterization, but maybe after these little eensy-beensy little baby steps, we can actually get a goddamn good war story out of EA one of these damned days. Once you land, it's the Allied Assault that you remember from before. Yeah, on the gameplay front, there's not much new to say. It's the same tried and tested mechanics of the base game, with the same returning guns, health system, taking cover behind random vehicles and buildings, and even nicking an entire clipboard at one point. Well, that and a couple of vehicle missions that are brought into the game. If you're gonna be rocking straight up to Berlin by the end of this, you have to go in goddamn style. And on the flip side of that, we also get the long-awaited return of the Mortar Challenge once things start moving towards the Frost Forest Fortress, and that's certainly something we'll be talking about. The gameplay is as solid as ever, the Nazis are still squishy and fun to shoot in the grader at the end of the mission will tell you what you shot, because bragging rights, I guess? Does this game have a leaderboard? Because beyond those two things, I can't think of another good reason why Spearhead has regional damage reports. So, during D-Day, you go around the village and smash the faces of anybody wearing the wrong suit to work. Well, that and they also have MP5s and really angry bullets. That's pretty much it. Get your bearings and try to make it to the end with at least half the amount of blood that's still in your body. Afterwards, your allied pals take you on a little boat trip to get to your next destination of shooting more village dinguses in the teeth. The next mission is more of the same, wide open fields, raiding farms, and taking on a turret section for a minute once you get to your temporary stronghold. The new countryside maps look pretty good and provide plenty of places to hide and some thoughtful shootouts when you have to sweep through multiple floor homes where anybody could really be hiding anywhere, except that this is an old shooter, so every enemy is just gonna jump out at you the second they get inside of 5 feet of where you're standing. I suppose it's kinda like Modern Warfare, but not like Modern Warfare because the mechanics aren't really gelling with what that game tried to accomplish 15 years after this one. So, after our harrowing and brutal beginning as a paratrooper in the D-Day campaign that was roped into the Market Garden fiasco, we get to the next leg of our journey, the Ardennes. The famous last roar of the German army getting circled in as the Allied forces trounce the entire continent of Europe. And likewise, this set of missions, not a great time. I probably spent half of the bloody game dealing with this extended inch-clawing battleground between the clueless wandering into enemy ambushes at the start, which is exactly like the beginning mission of freely wandering around, except add a tree every 10 feet of the entire map, reduce the visibility of everybody, and clad every single character in white, and you've got, well, you got this. So, after going through that meat grinder, you move on to the point when the Germans do get desperate and start going on the offensive through the nighttime fog, pulling the main character into a trench defense mission, which requires the player to get into a foxhole as the rest of the defenses are a bit too stationary for this sort of reckless charge, and really, it's just one of your two options for avoiding getting brained by the Nazis in 2 seconds. If you manage to make it that long, then comes the fun ending of this entire mess, manning the mortar cannon. This absolute goddamn train wreck has not been fixed from its breakthrough introduction, which would be fine if the mission itself were as indirect as the one that preceded it, but no. This thing is apparently essential defending off the vestiges of the assault, and it's handed to you on the front line. Not even any raised cover or good place to fire it from, and considering its incredible inaccuracy and slowness to kill frickin' anything, this thing is such a liability that it's amazing my quick loads weren't twice what they were by the end of this mission. So yeah, the Ardennes in video game land truly was the Frost Fortress of forlorn failure, because Christ, that was hard. I think I literally spent an hour in total dealing with that 3-part Hell on CD. Ugh. At least after that, the final part of the winter campaign has you going on a siege against an occupied church, doing a little sniping work, and generally winding down from a brutal assault defense. This was a little bit of a fun ride, and as a Midwesterner, I do appreciate the solid winter theming and decor. Lovely stuff for a bloody swath, as best as that could be. But now that we've survived the Ardennes and broken open the door, there's only one station left on the route. Berlin is ours! I mean, I'm sure there were a couple of things in between, but apparently Spearhead doesn't have time for all that jazz. We need to have you go clear out the bombed out shithole that somehow remains, and also dynamite some tanks that are being a bit of a hassle. There's not really much to say about this one either. It's a straightforward raid through the city and shoot anyone who looks too angry. You do have to do the demolition charges against tanks, which is, let's just say, an inexact science at best, but considering the mortar, this was a goddamn vacation objective in comparison. Follow that up with a couple intel gathering missions, and you've got yourself a Berlin on foot in hand. The final thing this game has to throw at you is wrecking up some shit in one of the Allied tanks. It's a 2-stick beatdown of bullets and, well, running over people when I just got a little bit too bored of the game. Although, considering my death count in this part, that might have actually been my main problem. In other World War II tank battles, you're going to be mainly dealing with crouchers in bombed out buildings brandishing their Panzerfausts in your direction, since you'll be working traditionally alone. Your job is to get through Berlin and to the other side in order to support another division and defeat an armored spearhead rampaging through the city as the absolute last line of defense that the city can muster. The important part of this mission is mainly standing on the opposite side of a river and treating the enemy tanks as a shooting range. Not exactly A+ material for the end of the game, but I guess it'll have to do since we had our survival excitement already in the last part of the deal. Yeah, if you're a bit perplexed, let me explain to you why Spearhead is the unfortunate disappointment at the end of a solid trilogy of shooters. In spite of the gains made to adding in good narration and some characterized intros to the missions with some actual depth to them, Spearhead is still a bad addition, clocking in at just under 3 hours, probably less if you weren't having as many problems as I did playing this blind. Like I said, the Ardennes took me an hour to crawl through, considering I died 30 times in that stupid hell field. Breakthrough had the legitimate good graces to hit 7 hours, and Spearhead struggles to reach even half of that time. There's no great story emphasis or new gameplay innovations, not even bothering to add in the stuff that was lost with Breakthrough's development. This expansion is disappointing even further when you start realizing that a lot of the houses and fields in Ruined City were actually used in the previous expansion and the base game itself. We've been to these places already, and some of the missions are literally recycled with nothing new to see. I'm pretty sure at some point in the trilogy we did Market Garden already gliding or parachuting into this situation, and now we're just doing it again. The Ardennes stuff was probably the only legitimately new addition due to the snowy atmosphere that I will say hit the nail on the head for the accuracy of that final struggle, but that also makes it really infuriating to play as a video game, you know? I can appreciate the adherence to realism, but this is a video game. Come the fuck on. Spearhead does have a few exciting moments. It can get ambitious and really interesting at times, but those times are too few and far between. The two familiar gunfights and have no new gameplay sections to see. It's really just a sharp, objective disappointment after a couple solid shooters since EA's developers didn't put together a well-meaning project at the end of their time with this property, and so the people who were invested in this PC staple of theirs get to leave it behind with bad feelings. Nothing new to add, no more quality time, just a couple neat ideas and getting to drive a tank around a bombed-out crap hole of Berlin. There are tons of stories in World War II times that have yet to be touched by Medal of Honor, and yet it always comes back to D-Day and Market Garden. Maybe the next all-new release will do just that when it comes back on consoles. Check back with us next time as we put on the helmet, jump in our boots, and get to face down the ultimate antagonist, Electronic fucking Arts.